So you have a few partners that you want to collaborate on tackling a complex issue with, and you're certain you all can work together to do something you couldn't do alone. So you decide, well, we need to actually make a plan together so we can determine what we're going to actually do. Maybe you've done a strategic plan before, or you've heard of strategic plans before, and you think you need something like that, but then you remember that either last time you did a strategic plan, or you've heard from friends or colleagues that they did a strategic plan and it was a long process with a lot of thinking that went into it and very little action. In this video, I'm going to share strategic doing with you. Now, strategic doing is a process you can take to focus in on what you and your partners can actually accomplish, and you start actually doing stuff together as fast as possible so that you can test what works and what doesn't. You answer 4 questions. What could we do? What should we do? What will we do? And what is our 30-30? In order to do a strategic doing workshop, you'll need a group of partners. Well, it might be community members. You might have people from the city governments, or you have people from institutions. There are people who are interested in tackling the issue you are set to tackle. Also probably need about 2 facilitators, one to keep the conversation going and the other to take notes and pay attention to things on the sidelines. So of course you could feel free to contact me if you need a facilitator, but in this video I'm going to run through the steps. The first thing you want to do is create a safe space for deep and focused conversation. For example, where is the event going to take place? Generally speaking, you want it to be in a nice environment that's neutral to all the collaborators. Another thing you want to pay attention to is to think about what sort of agreements do you and your collaborators need to buy into in order to make sure that everybody feels comfortable sharing their thoughts and providing feedback. I have 4 that I generally like sharing at the beginning of any meeting I'm facilitating. One is to be open to new ideas, to be curious about different perspectives, be kind to each other and ourselves, and finally, to make sure you share any ideas you have and that you encourage others to share as well. Generally, what I do is I share these 4 and then I ask others in the room if they'd like to add any additional agreements. Another thing you want to consider as you start to create a safe space is to think about how you're going to address any potential power imbalances. So oftentimes when you're collaborating with a group of partners, there are some partners that might have more influence or more sway than others, whether it's formal or informal. You want to think about how you're going to bring people around the table in a way where everyone is seen as equal. It's considering how you're going to encourage equity of voice. Everyone around the table should be contributing to the conversation an equal amount. Generally, when you're hosting a strategic doing workshop, everybody is there because they have some buy-in to addressing the complex issue that you're seeking to address, and they are there because they can contribute and should want to contribute. Once you create a safe space, the next stage is to frame the conversation around an appreciative question. So if you followed some of my other videos, you've heard me talk about appreciative inquiry before. But the whole frame of an appreciative question is focusing our conversation around the opportunity as opposed to the challenge. So let's say the complex issue you're addressing is high school graduation rates. Instead of asking something like, why are students not graduating? Your appreciative question might be, what would it look like if all our students graduated high school? Your question should be surprising. It should be personally meaningful to the group. It should prompt people to share their experiences and encourage people in the room to explore opportunities. After everyone's introduced themselves and knows a little bit about each other, you want to uncover hidden assets. Assets can be physical or natural. I'm talking about things you can touch, like meeting rooms, maybe equipment, for example, office space. An asset can also be skills or knowledge. So think of things people know. For example, maybe you have people who know how to write grants. I know about data and evaluation. These are talents, skills, or knowledge. We also have social assets. These are the networks or people we have access to. You can think of them as professional connections, maybe networks you're a part of. I'm a consultant, and as a consultant, I'm a part of a lot of small business networks. These are social ties or social assets I can bring to the table. Finally, we also have capital. You can think of these as financial or human resources. An example here might be discretionary funds. Once everyone has gone around the room to share what assets they're willing to contribute, it's time for you all to link and leverage those assets for new opportunities. You can ask people to look at the assets that have been made available and consider how they can combine them together to make up opportunities. You can think of this like putting Lego pieces together. Encourage your contributors to be as creative as possible. Let's say our appreciative question was something along the lines of, what would it look like if every child had available childcare? Some partners willing to contribute funds. Maybe we have some partners who are connected socially with community colleges, and other partners who are connected with the business community. Maybe they know a lot of child care centers. One potential project might be an internship where people get paid to intern at a child care center. Another way to combine those assets might be to create a fast pass certificate program for new child care providers. Maybe another way to combine those assets is to give child care centers sign-on bonuses for new providers. I shared 3 potential assets, and there's probably a number of ways you can combine them to create different activities or projects that might come together for you all to be able to create a future where more children have access to child care slots. Now, once you have a number of ideas, then you want to rank your ideas to find your big easy. So here you're basically ranking ideas based on how easy they are to implement and the extent of their impact. So 1, low impact, 5, stupendous impact. 1, very hard to implement, 5, very easy to implement. Once you rank those ideas, you can add up the scores across partners. Once you score the ideas, you'll move forward with the highest ranking idea. Then you want to convert your big easy into a measurable outcome. So what you're doing here is not necessarily making a commitment to measure something, although I would love it if you did. What you're really doing is really having a conversation with your partners about what success would look like, so that you can make sure that you are all on the right page, or on the same page, that is. What would you see, hear, or feel differently if this was successful? You're trying to come to a consensus around what this project would actually look like. An added benefit to this is that the more specific a project gets, the more excited people generally are about it. The next step is to identify one Pathfinder project with at least one guidepost. So this is where we get into some of the strategic doing language. So what they're really asking you here to do is to identify what a pilot for your project would look like, and what are some of the milestones, other people might call them, to know that you are on the right track to completing that pilot project. So you're basically identifying what pilot you can implement in the next 90 days, and then using that pilot to really think about what sort of things need to happen in order for you to implement the pilot. So what needs to happen in the next 60 days? What needs to happen in the next 30 days? What key steps are critical to the success of this particular project? Although I love data, doing something like collecting more data for the next 90 days is not enough. You need to do something that will actually lead to an outcome. This pilot project should be something you also don't need permission to do. The people in the room have enough agency, and it should also be something, like I said, that excites people and it creates a buzz. Like once people hear about your project, they should be interested in participating too. Ultimately, this pilot project should be something that helps you test some assumptions. So if you're able to implement it it should be a way for you to determine whether that big easy that you're working towards is actually possible or not. The next thing is to draft a short-term action plan with everyone in the room taking at least one step. So the question you're asking here is, what do we actually need to accomplish in the next 30 days? So who is going to do what, and how will everyone else in the room know that they have accomplished their task? So at this point, you have you're done your appreciative question. You identified your big easy. So what big project are you going to actually work towards? You've identified a pilot version of that you can accomplish in the next 90 days. And you identified what tasks you're going to do in the next 30 days. So after all of that, it's time to schedule in your next 30-30. So this is called a 30-30 because you're trying to meet every 30-ish days. And basically what you're doing is you're holding a meeting to check in on the project again. So what are you going to be doing during this subsequent meeting? Well, you and your collaborators are going to come together and talk about what went well and what didn't during the last 30 days. So what was accomplished, what wasn't accomplished, and why. Based on how things went in the last 30 days, you're also going to want to check in to see whether or not you need to readjust your strategy or any of the steps you're planning to take in the future. Next, you're going to nudge, connect, and push people basically to develop a new habit of collaboration. So if you had a facilitator, their job is going to be to make sure that the documents you created during the session get sent out to everyone, and that people are periodically reminded about what it is they were going to do or what they agreed to do during the session.